Welcome to another episode of the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kriv, and today is going to be a little bit different. Coop is not going to be on this call here, so we are going to do it solo. And what a week to recap. I mean, this was upset central, and I don't think anyone saw this coming. I don't think Vegas saw this coming, but I'm sure they're glad this happened. So to kick things off, we're going to look at the Syracuse Orange versus UNLV Rebels. And while this was a 25 ranked Rebels team against Syracuse, not necessarily a huge upset by any means. The original line was -5.5, but Syracuse went on the road into a tough environment and pulled out a win in overtime. And I think one of the most impressive things about Syracuse is their ability to win close games. They're 4-1. That record could easily be much different right now. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, though, with them is Kyle McCord, once again, he's in the zone. He just fits the Syracuse team like a glove. He brings out the best in the players around him, which is something we didn't really see a whole lot of at Ohio State. And he's putting them in a position to win games. And the other person on Syracuse that really kind of brings that offense into a very dynamic kind of feel to it is LaQuint Allen. The guy said he was on an 8 out of 10 pain scale going into this game. And he's a running back. He's literally going to get hit every time he touches the ball. And he balled out. Now you could look at his stats and say, he had only 3.7 yards per carry, but he had 19 carries on a injury and 2 touchdowns, and he was also part of the pass game. He caught nine balls out of the backfield as a running back with 2 more touchdowns. The guy's a baller. He's a gamer. And between him and McCord, they are just a great duo that allows Syracuse to compete with anyone. Now, as for UNLV, obviously they lost their quarterback for the year due to the transfer portal. But let me tell you something. Hajj Malik Williams is not the reason UNLV lost this game. He played very well. Yes, he had 1 interception, but he was hyper efficient. 21-25, 227, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, what more could you ask for? He threw in another 50 yards and a touchdown on the ground. He did everything he needed to for UNLV to stay undefeated. Unfortunately for them, their defense did not hold up very well. They gave up 14 points in the first quarter, fell behind, roared right back, took the lead into halftime, and of course, this game went the distance and +1 into overtime. So hats off to UNLV's offense. I mean, they could have closed up shop and people would make excuses for them if they lost games. This offense is very good, and they're going to be dangerous the rest of the season, but Syracuse was just too much. They have something special going there. I'm really impressed with what they're building. First year with a new head coach, and you kind of just see something building for them. And I'll say this right now. Wait for November 30th, Syracuse at Miami. Keep an eye on that one because Syracuse is going to be a very tough out on that. Then, of course, the next game is probably the biggest upset of the season and the biggest upset in Vanderbilt history, and that was Alabama going into Vanderbilt, coming off their great win against Georgia. And, I mean, nobody saw this coming. Vanderbilt had never beat a top 5 team previously. This is completely uncharted territory for them. They have looked good this year. They're 3-2. They could very easily have a 1-loss record, maybe even undefeated. They have competed in most games they've been in, and they've had opportunities. So hats off to Vanderbilt. For Alabama, Jalen Milroe, I mean, he was kind of just pedestrian by his standards. He kind of set the scale way higher after that Georgia game, and he kind of laid an egg. And partially, I don't want to blame him fully on this. It felt like Kalen DeBoer kind of leaned on him a little bit in certain situations to kind of use his legs instead of his arm. And I felt like that made him a little one-dimensional and kind of threw the flow of the offense off a bit. But Vanderbilt was ready for those plays. Brian Williams, I mean, he continues to ball out. I thought Bernard made some great catches in there to keep them alive. But that defense, it just doesn't have a good feel to it. Obviously, DeBoer wasn't able to bring over his DC from Washington, and I think that showed. Um, I mean, between giving up 40 to Vanderbilt and then giving up all those points and yards last week to Georgia, I mean, it's something to keep an eye on. Vanderbilt or Alabama can definitely bounce back from this, but that is a tough, tough loss. And just looking at Vanderbilt, I mean, that those coaches had those boys ready to play. That offensive game plan was executed to a T. And Diego Pavia, I mean, that guy is a gamer. I mean, he was hyper efficient, 16 to 20, 250, 2 touchdowns. But if you were watching that game, he made some tight throws. He had guys in his face, and he is incredibly poised. And that's a reason why Vanderbilt's had a chance to win most of their games this year. And that's by no accident at all. And I mean, you look at Alabama and on defense going against these receivers, and I mean, they gave up 6 catches, 113 yards to Eli Stowers. I mean, you have to do something and take away a team's best weapon. But once again, that goes back to Vanderbilt's coaching. They drew up a game plan and it worked. I mean, they did not dominate by any means on the ground. They did get 166 yards rushing, but it was 3.1 yards a carry. They were not moving it well, but it was timely first downs. They were able to milk the clock on the ground at the end of the game when it mattered most. I mean, absolutely incredible performance. Seeing that goalpost go down Broadway into the river. I mean, this is what college football is all about. And then on the other hand, the other Tennessee team, UT, I mean, they laid an egg. They went on the road to Arkansas. Arkansas already is a 2-loss team. I mean, I don't think anyone saw this coming either. To be honest, I mean, they were 14.5-point favorites, and they lost outright. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And the biggest takeaway for me, I mean, is Nico. He just leaves a lot to be desired. He shows flashes, and you go, wow, you can see it. You can honestly see a stud quarterback in those flashes. And then for whatever reason, it's just stagnant. I mean, he only averaged 5.4 yards of completion. I mean, what is that? Is it his receivers not breaking loose after those short passes that a few years ago where we saw Hendon Hooker, he'd hit guys real quick and they'd take it to the house? Or is it just Nico just not getting the guys the ball when they need it? Or he's not finding them? I don't know. That's something they have to figure out fast. They looked very good early in the year, and they're looking very beatable now. I still think Tennessee has a great defense. They gave up a few opportune moments, some deep fades that Taylor Green threw. I mean, but even then, Taylor Green got hurt. Malachi Singleton comes in. They barely throw with him, and he just keeps the ball. They should have been honing in on that and looking for that quarterback run. Try to stop the run, make him pass. And that didn't happen either. The one silver lining for UT's offense, though, is Dylan Sampson. I mean, the guy is an absolute beast, and at this point, he is the offense. Lucky for Tennessee, though, is that Nico's obviously very young and very talented. It's early in the year. It could click any day now, and this whole point will be moot. But they're running out of time to figure that out because that schedule is going to get much harder, and the opportunities to grow aren't going to be as available because you have to perform. So Tennessee, you're going to have to figure this out and figure it out fast. Arkansas, you guys just came through. Andrew Armstrong, I mean, that guy, he just made play after play, racked up those yards. Arkansas just did just enough to win the game, and that's all that matters. They weren't amazing by any standards, but they did what they had to do, and they defensively, I mean, I don't know if it's Tennessee's offense or Arkansas's defense, but They did just enough to pull it out. So hats off to them as well. Now this next team and game, I should say, was very, very eye-opening to me, and that was Miami traveling to Cal and barely, and I mean just barely, pulling out the win. They trailed virtually, I don't know, the whole game. Uh, they took the lead with just a few seconds left, and honestly, I'm putting Miami on fraud alert. They just don't seem to be as good as their record and their ranking shows. Obviously, they're going to move up in the rankings by pulling out this win, and everyone, almost a handful of teams in front of them losing. I mean, they have to move up. But there's something about their team where they could easily have multiple losses right now. They've had a lot of close games, and it's a matter of how much can Cam Ward continue to bail out the entire team. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, he is prone to mistakes, and he had one interception, but he made play after play after play and never gave in for the Miami Hurricanes. And he is obviously making a great Heisman resume. He's having Heisman moments. He's coming back from his team being down, scoring late in games. I mean, the resume is there. But at a certain point, that's going to run out. And you can't continue to do that game after game after game. It just, at some point, there's going to be a pick, there's going to be a fumble, something will not break your way. And they really need someone else to step up around him. Obviously, their run game is pretty solid. They have a lot of talented backs. Mark Fletcher is obviously great. Restrepo, I mean, he's the guy. He's the guy who can take a short pass and get those yards after catch. And that is a huge deal for this Miami team. Cam Ward and Restrepo have great chemistry, and if once they get to play a better team though, where they can hone in and take someone like that out of the game, I question if that's gonna kind of take that dynamic offense feel to them out. And we're gonna have a few opportunities to see that. But this defense on Miami needs to figure it out. They're giving up too many points this week, too many points last week against Virginia Tech. I mean, they are on the brink of losing almost every game. And the way that the games are playing out is very similar. So once again, much like Tennessee, even though Miami's still undefeated, they have some major things to figure out fast. And luckily for Miami, they have Cam Ward who's bailing them out. And the ACC is relatively weak as well. So they might continue to rip off wins, but they're going to have to get some help elsewhere, because I just don't see it being a sustainable winning style for any team. And then the next game will be a quick recap, because this upset was an upset, but it was not very competitive. And that was Missouri going into Texas A&M and just getting completely destroyed. And you can go back to the first quarter where Luther Burden caught that touchdown. It got called back on a flag. Say, hey, that changed the whole game. And maybe to an extent it did, but Texas A&M dominated the line of scrimmage in this game. They ripped off so many runs. Le'Veon Moss was cutting them up left and right. And this is mind-boggling to me. Missouri obviously had some close games already this year. Brady Cook, Nate Noel, Luther Burden. I mean, those are three very talented guys to build your offense around. And it just seems to not be clicking for whatever reason. They seem to be out of sync of sorts. Maybe they were drinking their own Kool-Aid, but there's definitely something amiss going on there, which is honestly shocking. I thought they were going to have a great great year. I mean, it is one loss, but I mean, it just doesn't look promising for them. There's still time to figure it out, but I mean, you're going into the heart of your SEC schedule. The time to figure it out was during this game against Texas A&M. I personally thought it was going to be a big launching point for them, where Cook and Noel and Burden were going to break free and kind of put everyone back on notice. And the exact opposite happened. Huge win for Texas A&M. They're in a great spot. They're going to fly up the rankings here with this win. And they put a lot of people on notice. I mean, you have a strong run game like this with Le'Veon Moss. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, this defense on Texas A&M stepped up big time. They did not have this run game against Notre Dame to this extent. And they're in prime position to make a little run here. So, new coach, new program. I mean, something could happen here. So something to keep an eye on. But yeah, super disappointed in Missouri. And it's going to be hard for them to bounce back because I just see so many flaws for them. I don't know if they have it in them for whatever reason. And then the other top 10 upset, of course, was Michigan traveling to Washington for a rematch of the national championship. And man, I mean, Michigan 4-2 already. They look like they don't know what plays are coming, so to speak. There's a little bit different feel to them this year. I think it's very telling how quickly they benched Alex Orji and brought in Jack Tuttle. And I know Tuttle didn't put up a ton of yards, but the offense did seem to look decent with him out there. I mean, he made a few plays with his legs. He made a few nice throws. If it wasn't for a potential pass interference call that wasn't called, Michigan might have been able to maybe pull this out. But yeah, I mean, it's somewhat stunning to see an offense so inept, especially coming off a national championship. I know you lost players, but I mean, this doesn't look like a talented offense with any sort of hope. Maybe Tuttle starting next week and having a full week as a starter, we might start to see some growth, but I mean, Michigan is in the danger zone. They have some tough games coming up still. And even the games that you might not think are tough might be tough for them. They're playing a lot of close games. They beat USC on that final drive. USC hasn't looked that great. And we'll talk about them here shortly, but it's starting to show a lot of attrition and coaching changes, and who knows, maybe those sign stealing scandal kind of fed into them a lot more than we thought. It's hard to say. I guess the one silver lining for them this game was Donovan Edwards finally got going a little bit. He seems to be a one-trick pony. He gets a little gap, hits it. If no one's there, you're not catching him. But he's not doing a whole lot else besides that. So, but going to Washington, I thought Will Rogers played very well. I mean, super efficient, relatively calm back there, very experienced. He made plays when he had to. He did have a pretty bad interception that kind of made people a little nervous there in Washington. I liked how they brought Williams Jr. in, used his legs to try to give him a little spark, got him downfield, got a field goal out of it. So I liked what they did there. Obviously, that this team had just as much attrition, if not more, than Michigan. So hats off to Washington. I thought they played a great game, gutsy game. They had payback on their mind, and even though a lot of guys are gone from that team, there's enough guys there that you could tell this meant something, and it meant something to the fans. And anytime you see that's college football, and it's a special feeling. I know it's not a national championship, and neither of these teams are going to be national champions either, but kind of gets that taste out of your mouth, and Washington, welcome to the Big Ten. You knocked off the reigning champs, so great start there. And then, as I just mentioned, the last game we're going to take a look at here was USC at Minnesota. And once again, I mean, this was nearly 10-point favorite USC. And I think this probably opened a lot of people's eyes for what USC is. And that is just, I hate to say it, but an average team with a lot of flaws. Miller Moss, I mean, what we saw against LSU was great. It kind of showed a lot of promise. He was making some great plays. I mean, he was not good. He had 2 interceptions. He just never looked settled. They even got in the red zone and they went into the Wildcat. I mean, how you don't trust your starting quarterback there? I mean, I know they scored a touchdown on the Wildcat play, but I mean, to pull him off to the field or actually line him up as a wide receiver, I think says a lot about your trust in your quarterback. And I think Lincoln Riley kind of, I don't know if he's punting on Miller Moss and just trying to get through this season, but I mean, that is a devastating loss. I mean, and the other thing that I just can't figure out is the lack of use for Zachariah Branch. I mean, that guy is so dynamic. He'd be a number 1 receiver on most college football teams, and he's barely being used. They got him the ball once on 1 carry. He had 3 catches. I mean, they're giving him short little passes and trying to make people miss. I don't know what they're doing. It's malpractice. We should be talking about him a lot more. And I don't know if that's on Miller Moss or Lincoln Riley, but you're not using a special talent, and it's very clear. And it'll be very interesting to see. If I'm him, I consider transferring at the end of the year if they don't start to feed him in the right way. I know they have some top quarterback prospects coming in, but you have to use them better. But then looking at Minnesota, I mean, Minnesota just played their game. They didn't do anything special. They took what the defense gave them. I mean, Brosmer didn't have any touchdowns or interceptions, which is exactly what you need. They used him for quarterback sneaks and got 3 touchdowns, and they just grinded their way to a win. Good for Minnesota. I mean, they were having a relatively down year going into this game. So they pulled it out. USC got a loss. USC has a lot to figure out. Thanks to the 12-team playoff, they have a chance. But they have very little to no room for error the rest of the year. And honestly, I don't think we're going to see that happen. So USC might actually have been eliminated this week from the college football playoff. But yeah, great week of upsets and surprises. I don't think anyone thought this was going to be the weekend of upsets and a great weekend where we were all going to talk about. There was virtually no ranked versus ranked matchups. I mean, it had the makings of a very boring week, and it ended up being a special one. And I think it's one we won't forget anytime soon. So thank you for watching this latest episode. Coop will be back for the next one. And if you can, leave some comments below what you think about the playoff picture going forward. The AP top 10 poll, did they get that right? I mean, it's all over the place. And be sure to like and subscribe.